Hi, I'm Jim, and this is J&R Woodworking. I've been getting a lot of questions and comments. It's been a long day on this pin router I built out of this old Craftsman radio arm saw. So if you have a radio arm saw and it dies on you, don't get rid of it, because you can build something that you're going to use a lot once you get your hands on it. The bench I have it mounted in is 1.1 inch thick. It is 30 inches wide and it is 12 feet long. I have a regular radio arm saw over there that I cut all my angles with. My old DeWalt back there I use for just square cutting. I never turn the head. And this one, this old Craftsman, I use for a pin router. This one is back probably in the mid to late 50s, I think. And you just swing it out here, lock it in place and tighten it up. Now I think it'll be, I don't know, it might be easier if I put the camera right here on the bench. And we'll try it like this, I guess. Let me bounce you over here. To set this up, I have 4 sockets. Let's call them sockets. I mean, I made this thing. There is no description for these parts because you can't really buy them anywhere. You're going to have to get them made. I have one way back there, and I use that for if I'm doing really large pieces. I can cut back here and I don't have to worry about the part being out here teetering off the edge. But 90% of the time I am cutting with the center one. These out here, I put these out here for making large radius cuts in sleds for my saw. So I don't use these much at all. But the cutters are solid carbide, 2 flute, 1/4 inch bits. And they hold up extremely well. They don't seem to dull bad at all. They are 1/4 inch in diameter. They're a 1/4 inch shank, and the cut length on these, you can cut 3/4 of an inch. So if you're cutting 3/4 inch stock, like this blank here that I cut out, you can make that in all one cut. Now, these patterns, this is a pattern I bought for a clock I build a lot of these. This is a little girl, and then there's a little boy. The girl leans one way, the boy leans the other. And the faces are different. But when I buy the patterns, this is a big pattern. It's probably 3 foot by 5 foot. You're supposed to cut it up and glue it. Well, I glue it on here, and then I cut this out very carefully. And I sand to the lines very carefully. Because whatever this pattern looks like, every clock you build is going to look just like this. So you want all your curved edges nice and smooth, no facets or flat spots on them. And that way you only have to make one. And then everything else you cut on here. You don't use a bandsaw. Some of these pieces, like this one, well, this one also, it has an interior hole. And this one does. So what you do to get in there, you don't even have to drill a hole, like you do for a scroll saw. You just crank this head up. You crank it up high enough where you can take your pattern. Your pattern will be screwed onto your blank, and then you flip it upside down. Your pattern's got the hole in it. You put it in here and you drop it over top the pin. You crank the head down and you plunge right through your blank. Now I've got a depth stop back there. I'll show you how I made that, because without that, if you're not careful, when I made these pins, I had them black oxided. And if you're not careful, when you come down with your cutter, you'll hit the pin. See how shiny the top is? That's because it's about 1/16 of an inch shorter than what it was originally. You're not going to stop these cutters. The sockets, they're machined completely flush in the tabletop or a little low. That's not going to matter. You just do not want them sticking up above the table. This one is 1 inch diameter on the bottom. It's 1.5 inches long and has a set screw in it. That's what holds the pin in position. Now, when you put your set screw in, you have to put it from this top surface to the top of this set screw lower than what your tabletop is thick. Otherwise, your set screw is going to be buried in here in the top somewhere and you ain't going to be able to get to it. So that's why this is 1.5 inches long. The head is 1/4 inch thick, and this one is 2 inches in diameter. And I made it that size because when I built this thing over 20 years ago, I had a bigger rabbiting cutter than I do now. This is a standard 3/8 rabbiting cutter. And if you put a center hole of 1 inch for the body to drop in there, your head size is going to have to be 1 3/4 inches, because this is only going to cut 3/8 of an inch both sides of this 1 inch hole. And you just put it in a free standing router, and you go in here and you cut this out, and you keep cutting it out until this goes in here flush. No big deal on that. Then I have 3 holes that are drilled and countersunk for the screw heads, because you don't want them sticking up. You could put 2 in if you want to. All you got to do is hold it in there so it don't vibrate around on you. The center hole is drilled and reamed to 1/2 inch. These pins are made out of what we use at the shop a lot, drill rod. It's a harder material, and it comes in, this is a 1/2 inch piece, and I turn the end down. When we get this stuff, it's ground and polished to 1/2 inch. And if you go through the stack and mic it, sometimes you'll find a piece that's like 1/2 thousandths to 1/1000th of an inch under 1/2 inch. And that'll give you a little clearance so it'll slide in there nice, but you don't want it sloppy. I have an Allen wrench sticking out here that goes all the way back to the socket. So we can put this in. Another point, you can see these 2 circles on there. That's from the set screws. I machine a flat on these pins. If you don't, and you just crimp that set screw into this round diameter, it is going to raise the surface and you're not going to get it out of your socket. It'll be stuck in there. So you want to put a flat on there, and if you turn this thing back and forth as you're tightening this, you'll find a flat. My patterns I make out of 9-ply 1/2 inch Baltic birch. It is very stable, it doesn't warp, it doesn't change in humidity. It's really nice stuff. It's a little on the expensive side, But once you make a pattern like this out of it, you're never going to have to make another one. So it is good material to use. Your pin, you want to adjust that so it is somewhere lower than the top of your pattern. Let me see if I can bring this in a little closer. It doesn't matter how far it's below the top, as long as it's below. I usually stick it down there a good 1/8 of an inch below the top of the pattern. Then you can line up your cutter with the pin. And you want to take time doing that, because you want it directly over top that pin. Now, I guess I better back up a little bit. When I put these sockets in here, I started out with a 1/4 inch pin. I positioned this thing wherever I wanted it, and I cranked the head down, and I bored a 1/4 inch hole through the top. So I put 4 of them in. Then I took the collet out for the 1/4 inch bit, and I put a 1/2 inch bit in there, and I bored back through and opened these holes up to a 1/2 inch. Then I got out my Forester bit, and I put that in here, a 1 inch Forester bit. Now, they are not made to spin at 20,000 RPMs. So you don't want to drill that whole hole at one time, especially all 4 of these. In this material, that bit's going to get probably red hot, and it's going to destroy it. So I drilled down in there maybe a 1/4 inch, and I quit. I let it sit until I could touch it and feel that it wasn't hot. Then I just kept going until I had them all the way through. Then I took another router and I opened these holes up with that rabbiting bit. So okay, now you got these things in here. You want to adjust that so it's below your pattern. Now back here on the column is my depth stop. Now this is really expensive and high tech, but it works good. It's around the column on the back of the saw, and it is, maybe I'll just move you back there. It is just a standard hose clamp around the column, and you tighten it up with a screwdriver. Now if I can get the camera back in there. That could be interesting. You crank your cutter down till it's probably a 1/16 of an inch off the top of the pin. Then you tighten up your depth stop. Now this is where your oversized pins come in. This one is 15 thousandths bigger than that 1/4 inch cutter. I use this one first. Now when I make these patterns, as you can see, I don't cut them out complete. I leave a tab on here, and that's where I put the screw through. Because obviously you don't want a screw hole through the frame of your clock, and I have 5 of them on here. I have 2 on the bottom of the feet. I try to position them in a spot that's simple to just knock them off on the bandsaw and belt sand them smooth. These holes are also chamfered for the screw heads, because once you get this screwed onto your blank, it goes on your saw upside down. Your pattern goes down, your blank goes up. This cutter, or this bit, it's been a bad day. This pin is 15 thousandths bigger. Now we're working on a diameter, round pin, round cutter. So actually this pin is 7.5 thousandths bigger on one side than the cutter is. So when you get this thing on here, you got this pin in and you're running this through, it's going to leave this 7.5 thousandths bigger than your pattern. And on pine, I don't worry so much about it because you could cut this in one pass and you get a nice smooth edge. If you cut this in multiple passes, like say 3/16 at a time and then move down and move down, you're going to have a line showing at the bottom of each pass. On pine, oak, ash, black walnut, cherry, whatever I make them out of. Now to get rid of that, I don't want to sand all that. I take this oversized pin out. Now if I'm making 6 or 8 of these clocks, I'll cut them all out at once. Then after I take this pin out and I put the 250 thousandths pin in, that's the same size as the cutter, I can screw these back on here because of the screws and they line right back up. Then I put this down and I run it through again. Now you can cut full depth no matter what kind of wood you're using because you're only taking off 7.5 thousandths. And when you get done with that, you're going to have a surface that is going to be sand free. You could sand it if you want to, but I don't. They come out that nice. The sockets I had to make at the shop on my lathe because, like I said, nobody makes parts for a homemade pin router. The pins, I had to make it work. The cutters, well, you can buy these. And where I got these 10 years ago, or maybe even a little longer, they were on sale for $7 a piece. So I bought 10 of them the first time they were on sale. And when they went on sale again, I bought another 10. And they last a long time. I got a hold of the place where I bought these from, and now they're up to $30 a piece. So I got a hold of the boss, Tim, the guy I did his snapper, and I asked him, he buys end mills, drills, taps, reamers, and he gets them from this Universal Cutting Tool company. And this is the email address she told me to have you guys go to and check pricing and to order. Or you can just call the 1-800 phone number on the bottom of this sales sheet. Now these cutters don't really have a part number. They go by the description. It's got flute diameter, which is 1/4 inch, shank diameter, which is 1/4 inch, cut length is 3/4, and the overall length of the bit is 2.5 inches. And these today, current price is $7.80. So basically, from this company, it's the same price as I paid 10 years ago. So that's a really good price. The lady's name is Diane Brown. If you call her up, she usually answers the phone and you can talk to her. I will put this information in the description box below, and you can, if you don't get it broke down in time on the video, you can go down there and get it. But that's the name of the company I get the bits from. This is how I made my pins and my sockets. The radio arm saw, a friend gave it to me after the motor was totally destroyed because the bearings went bad in it. And we were working on his house, and every time you wanted to use this thing, you had to spin the saw blade and quick turn it on because the motor was, that's how bad the motor was. Well, then the bearings got to the point where the armature was floating back and forth, and so was the blade, and you just couldn't cut very good with it. And finally, the armature grabbed the field windings and destroyed them. So I got a hold of this thing. I said, don't throw it away. We'll do something with it. I took the end bells off, and I pulled the armature out. And the field windings are inside of this case, and they have pins they drive in. You really got to look for them. They're under the paint. I believe there was I think there was 8 of them, 4 on a side. And you have to drill them pins out. And then the field windings will slide right out. I made a couple pieces of 1-inch thick ash, and I cut them and sanded them so they just fit down inside of here. Then I took them and I stuck them in a lathe, and I bored a hole through them that this router would just fit. Then from the hole out, I made a saw cut, and then I drilled a cross hole, and I put a bolt through there with a nut. Now you got to countersink it for the head and the nut because you don't want it sticking out past the surface. And then you tighten that up and it actually locks to the router. You slide the whole thing up in here and you just put a couple sheet metal screws through the holes where the pins were. Like I said, this has been in there 20 years and I've never had to fool with it. It stays tight, and I'm surprised the routers lasted that long. But this is a Craftsman professional commercial router. It's only a 2-horse. Back then they didn't make them that big. Today it'd probably be a 3 or 4 horse. But it's a simple machine to make, and I'll guarantee you if you build one of these, you're going to use it a whole lot more than you think. Because with this, you don't need the bandsaw anymore. Rough cutting these things out to a line and then sanding them, you can just cut them out with your router. I mean, this is this machine works so nice. Before I got into the shop where I'm working now, it's a tool and die shop. I've been there 33 years. I worked in a wood shop, and I ran a commercial pin router. And I mean, it's a mammoth thing. It had a 5-horse 480 motor on it. On that machine, the head did not crank up and down like a radio arm saw does. You put your board on the table, and you stepped on this big pedal, and the table would come up, and it would plunge the cutter through your part, and you just slid it around against the pin. Same principle. That's what I came up with, this idea of building this thing. So I've had this at least 20 years, maybe 25, and it's been an awesome machine. It works great. I can just swing this out of my way, and I've got my bench totally open. Everything is recessed in. Really think about it. If you need some help building it, I'd be more than happy to help you out. And I guess that's about it. So I'll put the information on these cutters in the box below, and call Diane up if you plan on making one of these and order some cutters. Now, one thing you can do for me so I can help other people is subscribe to my channel. When you are looking for help, that's my long Allen wrench. When you're looking for help to fix something, work on a snapper, make a pin router, you're going to Google that. And when Google gets that question, their massive computer system is going to pull up videos for you to look at. And the way that computer finds these videos is the number of subscribers you have, the numbers of views that you have, and the numbers of thumbs up. It's going to pick the highest numbers and send them videos to you. Well, I want to help more people, especially rebuilding these snappers. So please subscribe to this channel. It is totally free. The only thing they will ask you to do, if you don't have an email address, they're going to ask you to create one right then. That is free. Then when you subscribe, you're going to push that little word or this button. A little bell is going to appear. Now if you touch that bell, every time I put a video online, you're going to be notified. If you don't want to be bothered, you want to watch, just watch once in a while, don't touch the bell. It won't bother you. But subscribing is really going to help me help a lot more people, and that's why I'm doing this. I don't ask for contributions from my viewers. I know a lot of people do. I've got probably, 50 or 60 people that I'm subscribed to, and most all of them ask for your viewers to send them money. I'm not into that. Maybe when I retire, but right now, I just like helping people. And that's why I'm doing this. So if you think of it, push that little subscribe button. It would really help out a lot of other people. And until next time, work safe, have fun, and build yourself a pin router. We'll talk to you soon.